Welcome everyone. So today we're going to be talking about pain and stress. And I titled this talk, are you having, how daily stress can lead to permanent neck pain. So the three things that we are going to cover today is I'm going to spend a few minutes just connecting the dots between stress and pain. We're going to get into a little bit of the science there. And then number two, we're going to talk about inflammation and pain. And then number three, I'm going to give some practical tips on how to improve circulation, how to address pain and relieve stress. Okay, so that's the game plan for today. Let me just kind of scroll through some of my notes there. Okay, so since this pandemic began, I definitely noticed, patients, my friends, family, everyone's just under so much stress these days. So I want this stress series to be quite relevant and quite practical and applicable. So I invite you to please, share some questions that you have or comments. Hi, Kimmy. Thanks for saying hi. I'm glad you're here. And my goal, I really want to inspire all of you to be able to make some healthy choices to just reduce the amount of stress in life. I think every single person that I'm talking to, there's just so much more stress going on these days. So that's why I'm doing my stress series. And I want to thank all of you who have emailed me, who've private messaged us or commented on certain topics around stress. And I'm going to read through a list of some of what some people have shared. And I want to have whoever's on right now, if there's a topic that you want me to speak on in the future, please either comment and say yes, or even put an emoji out or something like a fire or a heart emoji. So some of the topics people are asking, they want to hear about stress and sleep. Number two, stress and overeating. That's a topic that some people have suggested. There's also stress tied into fatigue and low energy. I know that's quite a hot topic there, so I'll look into that. Last week, I think a couple of you asked about stress tied into motivation, and that's definitely a topic that I can talk about. And then this morning, I actually got a really nice email, and thank you for whoever sent that. I knew who sent it, but you asked about panic attacks, and I didn't even think about panic attacks and just kind of that anxiety, how it really disrupted sleep there. So I'm just going to wrap my brain around that, and I'll see if there's enough interest, and I can put something together for you there. Oh, good question. Somebody already asked, can you be susceptible to stress because of your genetics there? And actually, that's a really good question. The short answer is yes. Based on our genetics, some of us are wired a certain way, and we could have a bit of predisposition. But I don't want to leave it on a negative note, because what's quite exciting that we're understanding around genetics is there are components of our genetics where, with a positive lifestyle and a positive, nutrition plan, less stress in your life, we can actually influence our genetics there. Now, just to be clear, there's certain things that we can't change with our genetics, like hair color and certain things. But our epigenetics is quite spectacular, where we are very adaptive beings there, and so we can actually respond quite well. So that's just the short answer, but I thank you for asking that, because I think what I'm going to do is, especially if there's enough interest around, understanding genetics there, I'm happy to dive a lot deeper. So thank you. That's already a great question there. Now, let's see, where am I right now? I wanted to actually, a few patients have actually reached out and asked about my online course, and I'm actually really excited to speak on that. And it's not quite ready yet. There's still a lot that I'm doing, but what I'm excited about is I'm able to bring in about my 15 years of experience and put it all together I'm looking at it about an 8-module course where I can dive deeper into what I think are very important pillars of health. Like, for example, I'm going to do a module on nutrition, a module on detoxification, a module on inflammation, hormone balance. So I'm putting that together, and I know a lot of you who've reached out. You're not in the Lower Mainland area, and so I think it'd be actually a really fun opportunity to interact live with all of you through this course. So more details to come. I think I'm a few weeks away from it. But what I have been working on is a stress quiz. Now, I didn't have it ready for today's Facebook Live, but in the next Facebook Lives or next few Facebook Lives, I will have that ready, and I'm just going to invite you to share that. Share that with a lot of your friends who, may be going through some stress, and they'll be able to kind of see where they're at on the Brio stress pyramid. And I'll go into more info later on. Okay, let's dive into our topic right now. So again, let me introduce myself for those who don't know me. So my name is Dr. Jeffrey Lee, and I've been a naturopathic doctor as well as a registered acupuncturist. And I've been practicing in Richmond for about 15 years now. And I practiced for a few years down in Seattle. And I'm very passionate on this topic of stress. And it's because I think everyone that I'm working with, whether it's a pain management patient, whether we're working on fibromyalgia, or we're working on skin health, stress affects all of us. And so today we're going to dive into more about how stress affects pain. So I'm gonna geek out for a moment, and we're gonna talk more about what stress does for your physical body. Now, we just reopened Brio about 2.5 weeks ago, and I've been seeing a lot of cases on neck pain, shoulder pain, back pain. And I work with a lot of techie guys there, and these guys are all okay, right? They've got the proper ergonomics, they've got the chair, they've got the right positioning of their keyboards and all that, and they're all doing really well. It's actually my other patients who just are working from home now, and I'm just surprised at how many people are actually working from like their dining room table or their kitchen table. So this is actually more for all of you right now who are just struggling with a lot of pain there. And if any of you have specific questions about ergonomics, I wasn't going to dive into a lot of it today, but I've learned a lot from some of my techie patients and friends, and I've gotten them out of pain, but they've shared with me a lot about the importance of ergonomics there. So if any of you are interested, please ask. But let's talk about a bit of the science, and I'm going to help you connect the dots with pain and stress. So stress causes this subconsciously, tense. It tenses our muscles, and which reduces blood flow to our muscles. And that lack of blood flow is really important because, well, let me back up for a second. When you're especially scared or in a fearful state or stressed out, automatically our nerves send signals to our muscles. Well, let's guard, let's protect ourselves. And in doing so, that stiffens a lot of our muscles, and it stiffens our connective tissues. And that lack of, or that stiffening and that lack of blood flow, it really reduces the amount of nutrients there. So we tend to have just a lot more stiffness, a lot of more muscle spasms. And this is what I'm seeing a lot of. And once we don't have enough circulation in that area, it's hard for the body to repair. It's hard for the body to let go. So a prolonged sort of tense posture, so whether it's a poor posture or it's just a prolonged stiff posture, it locks in this kind of unnatural position, and it leads to a lot of irritation in your nerves and definitely with pain. So let me unpack that a lot further, because we're also going to talk about two things. We're going to talk about connective tissue right now as well as muscle. And I want to spend just a moment on these two parts. Connective tissue. Now, another word for connective tissue is fascia. And 20 plus years ago when I was in medical school, we never really learned that much about connective tissue or fascia. But really in the past 10, 15 years, there's so much more information. So what is fascia? Fascia is actually this envelope that wraps right around all of our muscles there. And it kind of holds the muscles in place, and it actually kind of goes in between all our muscles as well. And it's sort of a thicker, kind of a grittier, a denser material, and it, in some respects, it can offer a little bit of structure to our muscles there. Now, connective tissue is very different from muscles because connective tissue lacks a lot of blood flow. So that's why sometimes when people are injured, whether it's, I treat a lot of motor vehicle accidents, I treat sports injuries, and sometimes the muscle actually can heal quite quickly because there's a lot of blood flow going to the muscles. But as soon as I can tell that there's an injury to the fascia or to the connective tissue, I know it's going to take a lot longer because there is a lack of blood flow in the connective tissue. Another way to look at that connective tissue is think of scar tissue. So if you are, you get injured, let's say it gets cut, your skin, the fibers are actually lined up quite well organized. But as soon as we have an injury, let's say it's cut, your body needs to heal it. And when it stitches it back together, it stitches it back in a very chaotic way. But this chaotic way is actually quite strong and rigid. But unfortunately, it pulls in slightly different directions. It pulls in slightly different vectors there. So just think of scar tissue and how it stiffens up. So we need to treat our connective tissue well. And later I'll give you some practical suggestions, and it's important to find a practitioner that understands the fascia. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is muscle. So muscle is a very interesting tissue because if you look under a microscope, muscle is actually two fibers. It's called actin and myosin. And the two fibers, they actually slide on top of one another. And when our muscles contract, the two fibers, they actually slide closer together and they shorten. When our muscles relax, like this biceps relaxing, the muscles just kind of, lengthen. And it's important to understand two things when it comes to actin and myosin. Calcium is a very important mineral. Calcium is very abundant in the body. We've got it in our muscles, we've got it in our bones. So calcium helps us contract our muscles. So if you can imagine these two fibers, think of the calcium as these little rollers that are just underneath. So calcium facilitates contraction and shortening. And that's great if you're exercising, you need to jump higher. It's really important to kind of load the muscles and jump. Now, when you're under a lot of tension, a lot of chronic stress, when calcium gets into your muscles, it kind of causes a long-term shortening. And it causes that stiffening, and it causes more muscle spasms. So another mineral that's equally as important to calcium is magnesium. So what magnesium does is it kicks out those calcium rollers, and it inserts themselves, and it helps relax. It helps lengthen muscles. So think of magnesium to help relax muscles, and that's really, really important. So the second thing that I want to mention about muscles is hydration. So the actin and myosin, they're sliding on top of one another, and if you have plenty of hydration, a lot of water in your system, you actually have this, it's a lot smoother the way it glides. But unfortunately, so many of us are dehydrated. So think of this, when you're dehydrated, think of Velcro. Because when you look under the microscope, these little fibers between actin and myosin, they really look like a Velcro pad. So can you imagine when you're dehydrated and not having enough magnesium there, you're actually causing so much friction, and all this friction causes increased pain. So I just wanted to geek out for a moment, give you a little bit of that background, and I hope that kind of sets the stage of why I'm very particular, because I have a very holistic approach when it comes to stress management and when it comes to getting rid of pain. Okay, are you with me so far? Okay, so we're going to move on to point number 2, is how stress worsens inflammation in our body. And I talked about a little bit about this last week, but I'm going to highlight it again. So I talked a bit about cortisol. Now, cortisol is our stress hormone, and cortisol gets a bad rap, and rightfully so, because if it's too much cortisol, it can really fuel inflammation. But I just want to back up for a second and just explain a bit more about cortisol. Cortisol is it's a very important hormone because it regulates our circadian rhythms. It helps us with sleep. It helps us with exercise. It helps us with sleep and appetite, and it helps heal our body so we have cellular repair after injury or stress from exercise. And it's also important for like glucose metabolism. So cortisol is actually very important. But what I said earlier is when cortisol is overwhelming, when you've got way too much cortisol, And what produces way too much cortisol? It's that prolonged stress. So I said last week, acute stress causes sort of an adrenaline surge. Prolonged stress causes our adrenals to dump out more cortisol. And in the future, I'll tell you more of a very interesting story about myself and my own cortisol levels. But it's a long story. I'll save that for another time. But just keep in mind that prolonged stress causes more cortisol. And cortisol, think of it as sort of a fuel to this fire. So you're just throwing gasoline on top of the fire, and the fire is pain there. So definitely, this is something that we want to be mindful of what cortisol does. I'm just going to pause for a second. Awesome. So I see another comment about stress and genetics there. This is awesome. I love these suggestions there. So I am going to do that. So we will, not today, but we'll talk a little bit more about just the genetics tied into stress and pain there. Or sorry, genetics and stress there. That's important. So just going back to cortisol, think of cortisol as that fuel on the fire, just worsening inflammation, just really prevents the immune system from properly healing, and it just exacerbates that chronic inflammation there. So let me just kind of quickly recap here, and we're going to launch into some practical strategies. So stress stiffens our muscles and our connective tissue. So think Velcro and how awful that sounds with your muscles. And also stress, it releases lots of cortisol. And cortisol, think of it as adding fuel to the fire and therefore worsening the pain. So today, point number 3, we're going to talk about kind of what I actually do in getting rid of pain or keeping myself, improving that circulation. So we're going to talk a little bit about stretching, hydration, and exercise. But I'm going to start off with a story here. I used to live down in Washington State. I did my medical program there, and one of our clinics was very close to Microsoft. So I started working with a lot of people from Microsoft, and it was really interesting. The team that I was helping a lot with as a student clinician back then was they were working on a tablet app. And I got to know these guys quite well, but a lot of them had chronic pain. And I found out that when these guys are working on projects, they would go like 6 hours straight, without taking a break. Microsoft provides them with a lot of junk food. So they had sodas, they had like chocolate bars. So they just would sit there and work and not get up to move and stretch and all that. So I was treating a lot of them for pain, so a lot of neck pain. And I needed, the acupuncture worked. I can get them, relieved of their pain, but it would come back because they're in such poor postures, right? They're on a game console or working in front of their desktop. Now, so one of the challenges I thought of with these group is I challenged each of those guys to drink 2 liters of water, not soda, not juice, but 2 liters of water a day. And I said, I'm just going to keep it as simple as that. And I explained to them how important hydration was. But my plan for them drinking 2 liters of water is I knew these guys had to get up and go pee. So essentially what I did was I forced them to get out of their computer desk and really walk to the bathroom and move their body. And that actually helped so many of them. So movement, stretching, hydration. I got them to do everything. On your way to the bathroom, just I taught them a few different stretches there. So I just wanted to share that story with you because that actually worked really well, and I share that with some of my patients actually right now too. But I want to just emphasize how important hydration is, and I've already kind of explained to you the background of why, where actin and myosin needs that water to flow well. So please keep hydrated, and coffee and tea, those are not considered hydrating fluids. They're more of a diuretic there. So for me it's just water. And oh, good question. There's another question about long-term posture, and we'll talk about that as well. I'll talk about that in my 3rd point there. But hydration, keep that in mind. So work up to it. The simple recommendation I tell my patients is, whatever you're drinking right now, add 1 more glass, maybe 2 more glasses of water per day. Do that for a couple of weeks, and then slowly add a little bit more. Ideally, it's like take your body weight. So let's say, for example, just for math, it's easy. I'm 200 pounds. Take your body weight, cut it in half. So half of that is 100, and then turn that into ounces. So for a person that's about 200 pounds, drink about 100 ounces of water. So you can do the math to sort of get an idea. And if it's really hard for you to get to that, don't feel like you have to drink a ton of water right away. Okay. Second thing I want to talk about is stretching. And stretching, or let's tie it into this excellent question about, so the question is, can long-term incorrect posture ever be corrected? And the simple answer is for sure. And I just want to really encourage you and remind you that the human body is actually incredibly adaptive. But I purposely put in my title, can it cause permanent pain or permanent longevity? Because on one hand, you hit this kind of point where you've all seen kind of older individuals who are really hunched over. That is at a point where things are unfortunately, locked in. The connective tissue has really tightened up so much that it's telling the bones to change its structure. So in that case, unfortunately, you can't reverse that. But you'd be surprised how amazing the body can kind of unwind. I like calling that unwinding because there's ways that you can get your connective tissue to just unwind itself. And I'll share with you right now a couple of things that I do. I used to actually have terrible posture. It was called I had a flat thoracic upper back because I was always, studying, reading, doing my research there. And the tension, they called it military back there. And what I ended up doing was I actually was able to retrain my body to improve my posture. But for me, it actually was reminding myself constantly to straighten up. And I don't know if any of you had your parents remind you about your posture, but I really had to do that myself because I got really comfortable at a certain position. And it really took me a lot of energy and I was very intentional. And how I did it, actually, I had Post-it notes. And I know it sounds super simple, but I actually put Post-it notes at some key areas. So on my computer monitor, I would put a Post-it note. Every time I see it, I just remind, okay, I got to stiffen up there. Now, I tried different contraptions to try to improve my posture. Those didn't work for me, but, I'm not saying it wouldn't work for you, but for me, it was definitely hydration. It was the reminder of actually intentionally sitting up straighter. And then I also researched and studied a lot of different hanging exercises. So I ended up getting a bar over my door at home, and I actually worked at stretching things out, hanging and letting my fascia kind of stretch out again. So there's a lot of great techniques out there to help kind of correct posture through stretching. And in fact, right now I have a daily stretching routine that I do. Actually, I do this with my younger daughter. And then this segues to actually my third point under improved circulation is exercise. Another thing that I do with my daughter every single day to improve circulation, to help with the pain, is we just do this 4-minute high intensity workout. And super simple, we hit all our major muscle groups, and that's what we do we do that a few times a day. And we also do animal locomotion exercises. So I just wanted, again, let me just summarize real quick about improving circulation. So hydration is very important, stretching and correcting your posture is very important, and then daily movement is very important there. You need that movement to really pump the blood into your muscles there. Okay, so do this as a daily routine there. Now, next, I want to talk a little bit of biochemistry. And biochemistry simply means what you can do on the inside of your body, what you can take in. The first molecule I talked about already was magnesium. And magnesium, there's several different magnesiums. And the one that I personally take and I recommend is called magnesium glycinate or magnesium bisglycinate. And that's a very important structure of the magnesium because that gets into the muscles a lot easier. There are other types of magnesiums, magnesium citrate, magnesium citramate. Those are actually a little bit better for other purposes, for gut health, for example. So magnesium glycinate is what I use. Now, I'm not going to give sort of a dosage to any of you because everyone's going to be a little bit different there. But what I'd rather do is actually share with you some foods. For my patients who've known me for a long time, I love teaching people about getting certain foods into your diet. So foods that are rich in magnesium, legumes, nuts and seeds, also salmon, different like fish. Those are some foods. Dark green vegetables, those can be good with a lot of really good minerals, actually, not just magnesium there. So keep that in mind there. The second thing about biochemistry is you heard me talk a lot about an alkaline diet, and I am a big fan of an alkaline diet. So having a lot more of a plant-based diet, a lot of dark leafy greens, that kind of sets that pH into a much more of a healing environment there. And I've talked a lot about this in my Wisdom of Chinese Medicine series. I've also talked about it, I think, early on in March. So check some of those videos out to learn more about just an alkaline diet there. Now, another thing I definitely want to address is really reducing that sugar. Really reducing those treats there and adding the sugar to your coffee, because sugar really worsens your immunity, and it's hard on that cortisol as well. So sugar really creates that inflammation in the body. So some of the biggest transformations for my patients coming in with chronic pain, they've seen everyone, all these different practitioners. And because of my holistic approach, I'm like, you got to start with your diet. You've really got to create that better pH balance, and that works there. It takes a little bit longer, but it works there. Now, the third thing I do want to mention is I wanted to share with you, I started off talking about fascia, and I think it's really important that we're really fortunate around here. We've got a lot of really good practitioners. So whether you're doing a massage, chiropractic, physiotherapy, or a variety of different body work, make sure you find somebody that understands connective tissue and understands fascia. And this is something that's took me years to really understand after working with hundreds and hundreds of patients. I really get a good idea of like, okay, this patient, only a few treatments, that's all you need because your muscles, I just need to relax your muscles. Where other types of injuries, I can tell that the fascia, the connective tissue is really stuck. So it's going to take a little bit longer. So find somebody that really understands connective tissue. And I just want to share with you just my approach to acupuncture, because I've been quite fortunate because I've studied physiotherapy, I've studied chiropractic medicine, I've studied all these different types of modalities. And in fact, I actually bring them all together because I see value in all those techniques there, but I really believe that it needs to be delivered in the right order. In the beginning of my practice, I'm trained to give adjustments, spinal manipulations, and I refer out a lot of my adjustments to excellent chiropractors around town. But in the beginning of my practice, I would adjust all my patients, and then I learned after a couple of years that I really have to work on the soft tissue, the muscles, the connective tissue first. Because if I give them an adjustment and their muscles are still so tight, it just pulls it out of balance then. So my methodology is I always take a very thorough assessment. I love doing the acupuncture because acupuncture does two things. It brings local circulation, so more blood flow to that area. So let's pretend we've injured our elbow or shoulder. I can put needles in here to really bring local inflammation. But the other thing that's super important with acupuncture is it communicates to the brain. It sends a signal back into the brain, and the brain will say, ouch, there's some stimulation, what's going on? And the brain will send some more signals, say, let's recruit immune cells, let's kind of loosen up these muscles here. So that's what I love about acupuncture. I can really improve local inflammation, but tell the brain and the nervous system to let go of that pain pattern there. And often, after acupuncture, I'll do, cupping. Cupping brings a lot more local circulation. And I do something that's quite unique called muscle energy stretching. Because once your muscles, just imagine muscles are super tight there, I put needles in, it loosens up. But then when I can stretch people out a certain way, it realigns those fibers. And having that pattern, that good pattern hold for longer is much more effective. And then I do occasionally adjust my patients to make sure we get everything back in alignment. So I just want to share with you that that's kind of the thought process that I approach pain. And I know I kind of went into a lot deeper into talking about just pain itself, but I hope I made the case of how important stress management is, and giving kind of suggestions earlier on about, hydration, stretching, exercise, all that is powerful for stress reduction as well. So maybe one last thing before I wrap it up, and I'll check some of these. If you guys have any more questions, please ask me. But I also want to say one other thing that we do at Brio was we use something called photobiomodulation. And photobiomodulation is laser therapy, like low-level laser therapy. We've been doing this since 2009, and this is something that especially if people have a lot of pain around joints. I love using low-level laser or photobiomodulation because those light waves penetrate through the skin all the way into the joint, and it gives more energy to that area so it can repair. So I just wanted to touch on that because I think that's an excellent therapy, and especially if people are scared of needles, because photobiomodulation, there's no pain at all. Okay, so I was hoping to just talk for about 15-20 minutes, but I always end up going a bit longer. So again, in summary, practical steps, improve circulation. Think of circulation. So hydration, exercise, stretching, but even things like hot packs, hot and cold. I do some hydrotherapy. That all improves circulation. Think biochemistry. Biochemistry, I'm talking about magnesium, an alkaline diet. And then also find that right treatment for you. See, are you a person that just likes the massage? Are you a person that responds really well to acupuncture? Yeah, find that what's best for you. And before I wrap up, let me just take a look at some more questions. Awesome, thank you for the engagement there. And if this was helpful, if you liked it, please give me like a thumbs up so I know. Actually, I can't even see the emojis on this screen. Again, I'm getting used to the technology. If you have other stress topics that you want me to unpack, please let me know. I love that people are asking about genetics and stress, and I'll look into that for sure. And then stay tuned for my quiz. I will be, sending out a stress quiz so you can kind of gauge where you're at. Thank you very much. Let me just hang on for a couple more seconds because I know last week there was a bit of a delay. Any questions? Awesome. Yes, drinking more water and improving posture. Thank you, Kimmy. I think that's super important. And it honestly, like, it works for me just putting that Post-it note every time I see it. I grab like another sip of water. Or just even setting reminders on your phone, and sure enough, after a while, you actually get really good at it. It becomes automatic. So that's great. Thank you, everyone, for your feedback. And again, once I gather enough kind of topics, I'll try to get that schedule out there so we can plan ahead on when I'm going to be doing these Facebook Lives. Thank you for your attention. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you soon.